Okay, Dr. Dittmar here again, and our next segment will address and help to explain a little bit another important leadership model that is introduced during the History and Theory course, and that's Ken Blanchard's Situational Leadership 2 model. Now here's what's important. When you think of the word situational, you can use it a lot of different ways. You know, we can say that any of the leadership models that we study, well, it depends on the situation whether you do it this way or that way. You know, it depends on what's going on at the time, whether I'm going to be X or Y. So it's situational, and there's certainly no problem using that phrase, that word in that context. But remember, if you are talking about situational leadership as a theory, concept, model, then you have to use the terminology and the conceptual framework that Ken Blanchard has developed. Now, just a bit of history here. This Situational Leadership 2 model came from a collaboration years ago between Paul Hershey and Ken Blanchard in developing what was called situational leadership. And it was essentially the same model, but over time they kind of went their separate ways, and so both wanting to continue to use this model, Ken developed his and calls it Situational Leadership 2. And it has some nuanced differences and some terminologies and so forth that are distinct from the situational leadership model that Paul Hershey then has been using for some time. But once again, it made quite a big splash when it hit the scene in the late 60s, early 70s, continued to grow and gain momentum as a very influential leadership model. Today, Ken Blanchard and his company, do quite a bit of work, have done quite a bit of work globally, in utilizing this model. So what's it about? This article, by the way, is what you'll read to get most of the information that you need. There's also a whole chapter in Northhouse on situational leadership as well. That tends to be more the Hershey-Blanchard combined model. Situational Leadership 2, again, is distinct, and we see it come out of this. So what's it about? The idea is this, that an individual or groups have certain capacities to do a particular task. And depending on what those capacities and attitudes are, the leader responds by using two basic behaviors. And in doing so, and doing it in the right proportion, or in the right circumstance, that individual or group can grow and develop and become more effective, so to speak. That's the basic concept. That's very rudimentary. So let's go into what he really talks about. The first thing that a leader has to do in this situation is to diagnose, just like a doctor diagnoses. You have to diagnose where the individual or the group is. And he uses this concept of developmental level. And so the leader is trying to identify where is this group or person at in terms of developmental level. And he has 4 of these. And these are around 2 things. The developmental level is the combination of 2 capacities, commitment and competence. So again, how committed am I to doing this? How internally motivated am I? And number 2, what's the competence level that I have? How capable am I of doing this task? And so I'm trying to figure out as a leader what this individual or group represents in terms of those 2 components. And by doing that, I can determine where are they. And so you have the D1 developmental level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it ranges from 1, meaning low competence, high commitment. You know, I want to do the job, but I really don't know much about it. D2, you have some competence, maybe low commitment. D3, that developmental level is moderate to high competence, and you have commitment that is variable. It goes back and forth depending on exactly what you're doing. And then in D4, it's high competence and high commitment. And so you'll see that in this material. And basically, again, what this does is it allows you as a leader then to determine what kind of behaviors do I need to express to that individual or group at this particular time. And so the two behaviors then, if you move down through the article, are supportive and directive. Those are the two styles. Supportive behavior means that you're encouraging, you're facilitating, you're asking, you're explaining, you're encouraging. It's that kind of support. Directive behavior, on the other hand, says, this is how you need to do that job. This is when you need to do it. And that's it. It's very, directive. And so you can get an idea here that depending on where the person or group is in that developmental level, I'm going to be using varying amounts of supportive behavior or directive behavior. So you can imagine if I'm a D1 person, if I've got the commitment, but I don't really understand too much about this new task, I need to be directed. I need to be told, what is it that I need to do? How do I need to do it? When do we need it done? That kind of thing. When you move further down the developmental line and you get to the point where you have a group or an individual that has very high commitment, very high competence, then you get to a point where you're not doing much of either. You don't have to be there. You don't have to support and direct much of the time. And so it's almost very much a delegating position. Now understand that it's not just a linear kind of thing where you just, you move along a developmental line and that's where you're at, and then you continue to move and you stay in that, and it's always moving forward. In fact, the individual or the group may move back and forth along the developmental level depending on the circumstance, again, the situation. If I'm an individual or group part of a group that has been working on a particular task and we were committed and we knew what we were doing, it was a delegating kind of thing. But if we were given another task where we're either not quite sure what it is we need to do, it's something brand new, or our level of commitment has waned a little bit on this next task, then the leader, the person responsible for that group or individual's work, has to come in and perhaps do more directive and less supportive, always with the intent of moving the individual group towards that highest developmental level, so that the group or the person can really be committed and really be competent. People also may go back the developmental level line by just personal circumstances, things that happen to them, things that can occur that would affect their commitment, their ability to do work. Again, the leader is always diagnosing, always wanting to know what's going on, what's happening to that individual. And what he ends up with, and again, you'll see this in your materials, is this quadrant, four quadrant diagram. And it shows that, moving from here, which is the lowest developmental level, the S1, you get high directive and low supportive, and then you move through it. It moves to high directive, high, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through all that. You'll see it right there. But the idea is that as you move through, and you'll see this sort of bell curve look, you move from being someone who's directive to someone who's coaching to someone who's supporting, and then finally to someone who's delegating, again, depending on that developmental level. So that's the basic concept. And for Blanchard, who is also very, again, interested in this idea of relational kind of leadership, this works. And it also has worked for a lot of people, a lot of businesses and organizations, because it's a model that is easy to get your hands on, so to speak, and utilize. And so, again, the idea here is that you have a model that that is based on a leadership's ability to understand, diagnose where a group or a person is along what's called a developmental level, which is made up of two things: levels of commitment and competence. And whatever that diagnosis is, then the leader uses varying amounts of what's called supportive behaviors, encouraging, coaching, that kind of things, facilitating, or directive behaviors where it's more of a one-way thing. Do this, do that kind of. But remember, when you use the word situational, make sure you understand, am I just talking about situations in general, or using the word in general, or am I referring to Ken Blanchard's specific model? And if I am, I need to use the language and the nomenclature of that model. Again, influential model, important in that bag of leadership literature that we have, and one that we think is important for you to understand. So thank you very much. Hope it helps.